Hello, my name is Malik Jabbar, the author of the book The Astrological Foundation of the Christ Myth in 4 volumes, and other books on the subject of astrotheology. Astrotheology, or cosmic mythology, is symbolic language. That is to say, metaphorical communication, whereas the true meaning of the message is hidden beneath the surface. A surface composed of euphemisms, signs, and symbols. Astro-theology is the encrypted language sheltered within ancient mythology. I repeat, astrotheology is the encrypted language sheltered within ancient mythology. Astrotheology is dynamic and scientific. It is logical, it is reasonable, and it lies hidden at the core of most ancient mythology, unrecognizable except for those who have a special insight referred to by some as the gnosis, the illumination. Astrotheology is an encrypted scientific means of communication evolved from the earliest systems of studying and categorizing the forces of nature by our ancient ancestors. The core of astrotheology is found in cosmic mythology. At its core, astrotheology is the transference of astronomical knowledge in a mythological format. Now, our subject at this time is December 25th, as the birthday of the sun gods. We want to explore the astrotheological connection between the date December 25 and the plethora of sun gods that have been assigned to that same birthday, including, I repeat, Jesus Christ. Now I want to move over to the graphic that we have here that will help explain why astronomically December 25 is the birthday of the gods. First off, we see a copy of an ancient relief here of an Egyptian goddess giving birth to the sun. This goddess represents the sky, and she is giving birth to the sun coming forth from her reproductive area. And I show this just to show the prevalence of the idea among the ancients that the sky was a feminine aspect of the universe in the eyes of much of the symbolism, and the sun was an offspring of the sky. Now, this birth takes place in the annual phase of the symbolism on December 25, or 3 days after the winter solstice, whatever date that a culture may assign to that particular time period, depending on their calendar or so forth. But December 25 is equivalent to 3 days after the winter solstice. Now over here we have a cosmic diagram that is showing the pathway of the sun through the ecliptic through the course of 1 year. This ellipse here, going around this way, this is the celestial equator. And this angled ellipse going through this direction, that is the ecliptic. That is the pathway of the sun. And of course there are a lot of components to the sky. I have put in this graph those elements that are important to this explanation that we are dealing with, which is why December 25 is universally the birthday of the sun gods. Now we have the 4 cardinal points, which are the winter solstice, which is the lowest point in the sun's pathway around the sun, around the earth, and I mean the apparent pathway. Of course the sun doesn't really revolve around the earth, but visually it appears to do so. The sun appears to travel around the earth daily as we watch it rise from the east in the morning and set in the west in the evening. It appears to travel up and above and around us, and annually the same apparent visual sequence takes place. The sun seems to travel around the earth annually and daily. Okay, so this is the summer solstice, which is the highest point in the sun's path along the ecliptic. And over here to the west is the autumnal equinox. The sun passes through the autumnal equinox on its way down from the upper hemisphere. We may recall that the upper hemisphere, or the northern hemisphere, is that area of the sky above the celestial equator, and the lower hemisphere, or the southern hemisphere, is that area below the celestial equator. And the sun spends half its time of the year above the celestial equator and half below. And there's significant symbolism to that, which we will discuss at another time. But this angle here amounts to 23.5 degrees. That the sun is tilted to the plane of the celestial equator. So the sun, when it's on its way down and it intersects the celestial equator, that's when the ecliptic intersects, the celestial equator. When it intersects in the west, that is the autumnal equinox, and that is the beginning of fall. And when it intersects in the east, that is the vernal equinox, and that is the commencement of spring. The sun intersects the vernal equinox on the way up, and it intersects the autumnal equinox on the way down. And of course the total annual cycle takes 365.25 days, 1 whole year. Now the ancients viewed the vernal equinox as the beginning of spring. And, well, it is the beginning of spring. We know at March 21, that's when spring begins. And of course the summer equinox That's the beginning of summer. The fall equinox is the beginning of fall, and the winter solstice is the beginning of winter. And these four cardinal points, the winter solstice, summer solstice, autumnal equinox, and vernal equinox, they are extremely important to astronomical symbolism, to astrotheological symbolism. Now, the vernal equinox, that's the beginning of spring, and in the symbolism, this point of intersection is a point of marriage between the sun and the sky. This sky goddess, she's feminine and represents the sky. The sun is male. Now the sun actually has two characteristics. One male adult father, and at this point down here at the winter solstice, the sun is a child. S-O-N, son. It's the son of the father. Because at this point, at the vernal equinox, when they intersect, in the minds of the ancients, they saw that as a conjugal connection between the father-son, excuse me, between the father-son and the sky. They saw that as a point of insemination, whereas the sun, when it crossed the vernal equinox, it was impregnating the sky. Impregnating the sky, so that after due season, in due time, a child would be born to this father-son of the vernal equinox. Now, this is mathematically true and has a relationship to human gestation, because when we count from March 21, which is the time of the vernal equinox, and from March 21 on around through the summer solstice, autumnal equinox, and to the winter solstice, and on to 3 days after the winter solstice at December 25, that period of time is 280 days. 280 days is the exact period of time for human gestation. That is 40 weeks, and normal human gestation, pregnancy, takes 280 days. And when they saw that sameness with human gestation, that required, on the basis of the mathematics of astrotheology, that the child son that was impregnated by the father son at the vernal equinox was required, according to the symbolism, to be born on December 25th. And so the selection of that date by the ancients is not an arbitrary selection. It is a selection founded on the principles and proofs of astrotheology, astrotheological symbolism. And in this, you see a correlation of the microcosm, which is man, to the macrocosm, which is the universe. And when it says in the Bible that man was created in the image of God, this God refers to the macrocosm. That is a form of pantheism. When the Bible and some other literature teach us that man is created in the image of God, this God that is being referred to is the cosmos, the universe itself, and not to some ghostly type humanoid. And when it says that man is created in the image of God, it's not referring to physical appearance per se. This is referring to proportions and numbers. What is meant by that is that the numbers that regulate the universe, the ancients found that those numbers, same numbers, correspond to the regulation of human biology. We're just dealing with one aspect of that when we show that the human reproductive system is in sync with the solar system. That's just one aspect. But there are multiple aspects of similarity or sameness between the human creature and the universe, of the microcosm to the macrocosm. The lunar similarity is a simple one to explain, in that the light and dark phases of the moon cycle at 28 days. This is an exact correlation to the cycle of the female of the human species, in that for 14 days, in half of the menstruation period, the woman is fertile, and for the other half, there's a dispensation of the fluid toward exiting the body. So this cycle of 14 to 14 to 28 of the lunar cycle is in exact correlation to the female human cycle. In other words, as above, so it is below. The microcosm made in the image of the macrocosm. And an important note before we go on: when the ancients said that the man was created in the image of God, or the microcosm in the image of the macrocosm, they were referring to the universe as they saw it, not as we see it today with all these millions of planets and constellations and even galaxies. I mean, there's no limit to what our astronomers are discovering nowadays. That wasn't the universe that they were talking about. Actually, the universe that they were talking about really comprised mainly of the solar system itself. And that solar system, as they saw it, did not consist of 9 planets. It consisted of 5 planets and 2 luminaries and 7 steps to the 8th step of the 7 steps upward toward the dome, with the 8th step being the stars. Each planet and luminary starting with the moon and ending as Saturn, represented a step up the ladder, so to speak, Jacob's ladder, as the Bible says. And the 8 steps was the level of the stars, and then the 9th step was infinity. But so they saw the universe in that way, in a geocentric way, and there are several correlations when we examine the cycles of that limited universe with the solar system as the core of the universe. There are several correlations that we will review as time goes on. But I think that pretty well explains that point. So we will move on. I would like to mention, as we close out this session, that there are multiple versions of the life of Jesus Christ. The Bible itself contains 4 versions of his life, namely the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But these are not all of the versions of the life of Jesus. These 4 Gospels are simply the versions that were accepted into the church canon. There are other apocryphal versions of the life of Jesus that were not accepted by the church, evidently because they did not conform to church doctrine, or they were considered not genuine renditions of the preachings of Jesus. In fact, all of the Gospels do not mention the birth of Jesus. Only Matthew and Luke describe the circumstances of his birth. And these 2 Gospels do not agree on all the particulars of the birth. The Gospel of Mark does not mention the birth of Christ. And the Gospel of John indicates in essence that Christ was an emanation from God that became flesh and dwelled among us. But John does not explain the process of the transformation of Christ from a godly spirit into human form. So there are multiple versions of the life of Jesus Christ, and likewise there are multiple versions of the lives of the other notable sun gods, such as Mithra of Persia and Dionysus of Greece, Horus of Egypt, and the whole extensive pantheon of the other sun gods that are spotted throughout the literature of the world's ancient cultures. These different versions of the lives of the various mythical deities and saints and gods, what have you, is usually attributable to diverse factions within the ranks of those who worship under various religious persuasions. The opinions of large groups of people always diverge over time. That's just a fact of life. So when we research the lives of the world's mythical sun gods, we will find diverse renditions, diverse opinions and stories of their missions, of their deaths, of their birth. But there's one constant that remains, and that is when the birth of the sun god falls in sync with the Sol Invictus. That is the birth of the unconquered sun, at 3 days after the winter solstice. That brings us to the core of astrotheological symbolism. And that is the thrust of the message that I'm trying to convey in this session today. And I think we spent enough time on it. So you can go to my site, malikjabbarbooks.com, and you can read excerpts of the various books that I've written on astrotheology. We cover the whole Bible. It's full of astrotheological symbolism, and excerpts are there at my site, available for your reading. And there are links so that you can purchase the books at a terrific discount. That's at malikjabbarbooks.com. So I thank you, and I appreciate your time.